Hello, welcome back into today's video. We're doing JMA Friday today, which means we're having a look at weather for the coming month across the UK. And this takes us, can you believe, into the start of August. So we'll be going into the final month of summer 2015 with this update. Been a very odd summer so far, really, with a lot of dry weather, but temperatures never particularly exciting, other than that one burst of really extreme heat that we had right at the start of July. It'll be interesting to see how things are going to play out over the coming month. Have a look at the JMA and the CFS to see what they're showing. Not sure the JMA particularly is performing all that well, though, this summer, so don't necessarily take the things that you see in this video all that seriously. It's just a very rough guide, but I think there's a lot of uncertainty, and we're seeing this playing out within the shorter range models as well. Just to talk about this very briefly, the shorter range models are particularly unreliable this summer. I'm not sure why the reason is, but it could be that what's going on in the equatorial Pacific in terms of the developing El Nino is having an effect, perhaps. The SOI keeps crashing, the Southern Oscillation Index, which is a reflection of the state of the atmosphere in the Southern Pacific Ocean. It keeps crashing, and then it'll rebound up for a little while, and then it'll crash again. And I assume that's causing quite a lot of uncertainty in the Pacific sector of the atmosphere. And of course, the whole of the planet's weather is interlinked, really. So if there's a lot of uncertainty in one part of the globe, around the Pacific Ocean, then you're going to get a knock-on effect elsewhere. And I would probably hazard a guess that that's what's been going on this summer, the reason we've had so much model uncertainty, the reason some of these long-range models, particularly the JMA, perhaps not performing all that well. Well, anyway, we'll get on with the charts in a moment, but before I get on with that, just to say about the ads, there's links to articles on all the pages at gadsoffice.com, and you can have a browse through widgets and click through the links. You'll be happy to pay for the website. Thanks very much for doing that. There's also video ads on all the pages. They open out within the content and then they'll close back up again. And all these things are allowing me to sit here and talk to you via the website, so thanks very much for doing that. So let's just start off with the 500 with our height anomaly charts from the JMA model. First of all, these are broken down into week periods, as you know. So the first week period will be for the week that we're currently in, going from the 10th to the 17th of July. Blue is extrapolating to low pressure, and yellow and orange extrapolating to high pressure. So what we see for the coming week is that I've got a ridge down to the south through many southern parts of Europe particularly, and then we've got low pressure, areas of low pressure to the north, out in the Atlantic and going up to Scandinavia as well. The jet stream with this is coming through the country more or less like that. So it is a more unsettled week here for the coming week. It is a more changeable week. The ridge is still relatively close to the south, so should keep southern parts of the country, I think, mostly on the dry side, but with the troughs of low pressure to the north so strong, they are really quite strong for the time of year, there will be some showery rain coming down even into the south through the coming week. And overall, it's a relatively cool and changeable week coming up. Not a washout, but certainly a more unsettled week than we've had in this summer so far, I would think. As we move through into the next week period, this one takes us from the 17th through to the 24th of July. What we find for this one is that the low pressure is sort of getting pushed off up towards Scandinavia. It's still there around Iceland, although it's weakening. And we've got this ridge developing out to the west and the southwest. So the flow here is going a little bit like that. And the jet stream being pushed a bit to the north, actually, but it still is coming into the north and west of the country. And overall, it probably keeps the south mainly dry on that situation, with the most unsettled conditions in the north and west. And we will be at times seeing the flow coming down from sort of a northwesterly direction. So I won't be expecting a heat wave on that type of setup. It's sort of back to the conditions that we had in June, perhaps, with the north getting the most settled weather, the south mainly dry, but not totally dry, but mostly dry in the south. And temperatures probably a little bit on the cooler side, really, with the flow coming from the west to northwesterly direction. And then we go on to the final 2 weekly period. This one takes us from the 24th of July through to the 7th of August, so into the last month of summer. And again, it's a very similar setup really. The trough is still in there over Scandinavia. The ridge is still generally centred to the west of the country, although it is ridging in at times. I think the flow probably going rather like that. So again, a lot of dry weather coming up. With that, wouldn't necessarily be expecting a heat wave because again the ridge is mainly centred to the west of the country, which probably keeps the flow coming around from sort of a west northwesterly type direction, and to get real heat you have to get the high pressure either over us or centred to the east of us and bring the air up from the south and the southeast off the hot continent. So wouldn't necessarily be expecting heat wave, but a lot of dry weather I think coming through with that, and overall very pleasant conditions. So it's sort of that idea that we have through most of the summer, that other than that burst of very hot weather that we had right at the start of July, not particularly exciting really, not a great deal going on, but pleasant enough. And I think that is how summer 2015 perhaps will be remembered. Of course, it's still fairly early days, but very pleasant summer, but not one that particularly sticks in the memory, perhaps, although we did have that very hot start to July. These are the CFS V2 500 millibar heights. Again, these are broken down into weekly periods. So the first week period will be going from the 9th through to the 15th of July. Again, very similar to what we had with the JMA. So we've got this ridge down to the south through the coming week. Low pressure, quite a deep low over Scandinavia and also out in the Atlantic. So the jet stream comes through rather like that. It is a more changeable week, with the north getting the worst of it, the south getting the driest weather, but all places I think on that setup at risk of some rain coming through at times. Notice all of this northern blocking up over the top of the pole. This could very easily have turned into a really bad summer actually, because we have had quite a lot of northern blocking, and normally in a typical summer northern blocking over the top of the pole would be a bad sign because it would force everything southwards. But because we've had this pretty strong ridge from the Azores, although generally centred just to the south and west of the country, because we've had that, it sort of offset this blocking. So there has been quite a lot of battling going on within the atmosphere, not necessarily apparent in terms of the weather we've been experiencing, but there's been a lot of battling going on between that ridge over the pole and the ridge around the Azores. But if things are set up very slightly different, say if the Azores high had been a few hundred miles away, further away from us in the central Atlantic, this could have turned into a very grim summer. And of course it may do that yet. It still is early days. We've got to August to go yet. The next weekly anomaly, this one going from the 16th through to the 22nd of July, shows the trough deepening over Scandinavia and the ridge is pulling out a little bit towards the west. So this probably forces the flow towards a northwesterly type flow. So that could be a relatively changeable week coming up there. I think the jet stream is probably coming down across the country. It could be pretty cool, and particularly from the north, quite changeable, but you would expect some rain with that coming through to the south as well. Now, the next weekly period, this going from the 23rd of July through to the 29th, this one shows that trough of low pressure over Scandinavia actually pushing into the UK. That's quite an odd scenario. The ridge is going right out into the middle part of the Atlantic. So this is different from the JMA, and as I say, have been seeing a lot of variability with these longer range models. They're not necessarily performing all that well this summer, but that's a pretty grim looking chart actually, because it would send the flow into the north, and this trough here would be providing the energy for quite a bit of rain, particularly in the north and the east of the country perhaps. So pretty grim there for the final week of July. I'm not sure about it, but it is at odds with what the JMA is showing, but there we go, that's what the CFS V2 is seeing for this particular update. But then we go to the next weekly period, it's going from the 30th of July through to the 5th of August, and a total change around. We get a ridge building right over top of the country, so that is summer coming back big time, actually. That could be very, very warm and mostly dry conditions for the start of August. So it really is very uncertain what's going on there between the JMA and the CFS V2. But overall, it looks a little bit changeable, I think, for the coming couple of weeks. And then maybe hints as we go through to the end of July and the start of August that we get some sort of ridge beginning to take over and maybe bring summer back for the start of August. So it doesn't really go away. Very pleasant conditions will be with us throughout the coming few weeks, I think. The temperature anomalies break down like this. So this is from the 9th to 15th of July, and generally a little bit cooler than average up in the north, near normal down in the south. The next week appear going from the 16th to the 22nd of July, generally going a bit cooler than average across all parts of the country through that week. The next week period, and this is when that ridge pulls right out into the middle of the Atlantic, and we get this trough setting up from Scandinavia, turning the flow into the north. So unsurprisingly, that week is looking significantly cooler than average. A really cool end to July if that was to come up. But I'm not really convinced about that setup. But that is what the temperature effect would be if the pattern did come off as it was shown. And then the final week, the 30th of July through to 5th of August, is when the high pressure is building in across the country, of course, that final day or so of July and start of August. And we see the temperature anomaly coming right back up. It's going back to average, so that shows a significant improvement in the temperature. Not yet warmer than average, but going back to average indicates a warming trend as we start August. This is the city temperature forecast graph from the CFS V2 model from the website weatherweb.net. This is for Birmingham. This is quite interesting, actually, what this is showing. So we can see that we've got the dates down here on the bottom of the chart. We've got the 11th of July there, more or less around where we're starting, through towards the end of August. This goes to around something like the 23rd, 24th of August, I think, something like that. And we can see quite clearly that pretty cool weather that the model is indicating for July. The graph goes very, very poor there for a time. Somewhere around the 18th, let's say, through to towards the 26th of July. And these are the temperatures just here, and that's indicating on some days that we don't get temperatures above the mid-teens Celsius. That really is dreadful for the start of for July. I think that again is associated with that trough coming in from Scandinavia, turning the winds into the north. But we do see at the end of the month, this is the 1st of August just here, that we get a rapid push up in the temperatures then. And actually, the model is seeing a pretty warm August coming up. The temperature sort of hovering around the mid-20s Celsius throughout towards the end of August. That would be a very warm month. Temperatures there around 24 to 26 degrees. And that's the sort of level we're at through most of August there. So that would be a really warm month, actually. Not a record break, but it would be a very warm month if that came off. So after the disappointing temperatures in the second half of July, CFS V2 is seeing a very pleasant and warm August coming up. These are the 500 millibar heights for the months, for the next 3 months. So this is for July. Finally, and I don't remember if I said you can find a link to weatherweb.net on the links page, but you can. So for July, it's seeing the trough to the north, very weak trough, ridge out to the west to the southwest, and the flow coming through rather like that. I think that's a pretty good representation of how things are playing out for July. For August, we get the ridge building in more or less across the country. It's a little bit to the north and the northwest, but it's close enough to keep things very warm. There is cooler air coming around that high, but it's generally over Scandinavia and northeastern parts of Europe in that area just there. And that ridge is close enough to us to give us a pretty warm month. And then finally, just a quick sneak peek at September. And it's seeing the ridge still in there across the country for September. So warm and dry conditions go on into the first month of the autumn, if that's right. And of course, September, as I've explained, is very often one of those months where we get loads of high pressure, loads of dry weather. It's always a nightmare month for me because I'm sat here wondering what on earth I'm going to talk about every day. But September does tend to be one of those months that has loads and loads of high pressure
And that's the sort of pattern that the CFS is going for again for this year. But remember, this is all highly experimental, these models are not to be relied upon. So it's just a heads up of where things may be going. So we're coming back to the next month anyway. I think we're looking at sort of changeable conditions next week and relatively cool as well. That could extend into the latter stages of the month. But the signals are looking fairly good, I think, as we go through to the very end of July and into the start of August. Right, it's a weekend forecast tomorrow, so come back for that. It's going to be quite a changeable one, I think, this week, with pretty cool temperatures at times as well. So not the best one that we've done this summer, but do come back for it anyway tomorrow. And that's all for now. Thanks for watching.